Today we're going to be learning how to make this really simple logo animation in After Effects. And when I say simple, guys, I mean simple. This animation is about 6 or 7 layers big. Only takes up one composition. There's no pre-comping. Very simple. The majority of this animation is animating scale, keyframes, and there's a few other subtleties. But to get started, as always, we are going to go up here, we are going to save as, make sure you save it somewhere that you can find it, and make sure you save it with a name that you definitely will remember. So for myself, I'm going to save it right here. Alright, next, come down to this button here, click on this to start your new composition. This is going to be our main comp. I'm going to be doing it in 4K, which is 3840 by 2160. I'm going to be doing it at 23.976 frames a second. And for the duration on the timeline, I'm going to do 8 seconds. Okay, so to get started here, we are going to come up to our tool for the ellipse tool. We are going to hit Control Shift to make our circle scale evenly. And we're gonna let go here, and then because our anchor point is not in the center of our shape right now, we are going to hit the keyboard command of Control, Alt, and Home, and that will bring our anchor point to the center. Very important that this anchor point is in the middle of our shape. That will matter when we start animating the scale. It'll make sure that we're not scaling from somewhere over here, and we're scaling directly center of our shape. But then what we can do is we can come down to our align panel down here, and we will hit these two to put it in the center of our composition. And right now I am looking at the shape, and this shape is a little bit too big, so if we come over to our shape properties, we'll see that we have our size right here, and I think I'm gonna do 1250. I think that'll be good to start. If I have any issues with sizing, we will come back here and we will change the size of this shape. But for now, I'm going to click over here, I'm going to enter, and I'm going to call this circle space 1. And then quite simply, we are going to hit Control D to duplicate this. We need 5 layers, so we're going to do it 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. We now have 5. I am going to reorganize these where I just pull the numbers to start at 1 at the top, just the way my brain likes to work. But now that we have our 5 circles, to get them in the orientation of what we need to start our animation, we are simply going to hit S on the keyboard, and that is going to pull up our scales. And when scaling, we're not going to be individually scaling each layer. We kind of scale everything together, which is what keeps all this even spacing in the animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all of them highlighted for now, and we're going to type 75% into the scale property. From there, what we can do is we want to go up by increments of 75% on all of the other layers, so that way they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we can do, instead of having to, pull out a calculator and do 75 plus 75 to get 150 and then so on and so on, what we can do in here is we can do simple multiplication. So we can do 75 plus 75, and that will get us 150. And then what we can do is just keep deselecting each one of these by hitting Control click on it and just coming back into the type box and hitting plus 75 on all of these. And yeah, so plus 75 again here will get us to 300, and then Control select and do our last one here, plus 75, and that'll bring our last one to 375. And then what we can start doing is we can start coloring all of our circles. Right now, it just looks like we have one solid rectangle here, but I promise you we don't. What we can start doing is we can start coloring. I have my own color palette that I'm going to be color picking from right now. And I'm just going to be picking from the last animation that I did for basically trialing and erroring this. If you have your own colors for your own logo, I advise you to pick those types of colors. But yeah, quite simply, to color pick, if you have like a color palette next to you, you'll come up here to fill, you'll click on this little eyedropper, and then you will come over onto your screen and you'll be able to kind of highlight over things, and you can see that the color is changing on our monitor here. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to select the proper colors for all of my stuff, and you guys can do the same. But now that we have all of our colors picked out, or at least I do, the next step of this project is kind of where we can start adding in some of our 3D looks. Everything in this is pretty much 2D, although we will be turning on 2 3D layers a little bit later on in this tutorial. But to do so, we are just going to click on this one for now, and we are going to find our effects panel over here, effects and presets. Mine is all the way down here. And we're just going to search up drop shadow. And then we're going to click and drag that. We're going to put that onto our first circle. We are going to change our direction to 180 degrees. We are going to keep our distance at 0. So for our first drop shadow, we're going to be making a very soft shadow, so the direction doesn't really matter here. But we're going to add a 600 softness to this, so we get this really soft kind of shadow. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we are going to hit Control D on this to get our second drop shadow. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn our softness all the way back down to 0, and then for distance we're going to do 10, and that's going to give us this hard shadow right here. Basically gives us a little contact shadow for our shape, and that allows it to kind of even separate itself more off of the layer behind it. But then what we're going to do is we're going to come here, we're going to highlight both of the drop shadows, we're going to Control C to copy it, and then we are going to select all of our other shapes. We're going to click on the effects control panel, and then we're going to Control V to paste them all, and now we have that same effect with all the same parameters applied to all of the other layers. So nice and convenient. Okay, so now we can start actually animating. So I'm going to move my playhead out to just about the 2-second marker to give myself some space. We are going to select all of our circles, but quite simply, this is our, I would say, our beauty frame. This is where I want things to land. This is where, you know, I kind of want the logo to shine, just about in this sizing of all the circles. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all of them selected, hit our scale keyframe. While all of them are selected, we're going to hit F9 to easy ease them, and then we are going to hit the home key on our keyboard to bring our playhead back to the start of the home. And then what we are going to do is we're going to grab on circle 5 the largest percent, so 375 on the scale, and we're going to click and drag. Make sure we drag and we don't type, and we're going to drag this all the way back to 0. Went a little too far right there, 0. And now we can see all of our numbers have inverted here, which is okay except for the last one. And if I just hit play here, we can kind of see it does it, but we're awkwardly inverted here. So what we're going to do is not worry about that for just a second. We'll come back and we'll fix that area. But to do the next part, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of our end keyframes, and we're going to move them to 2.5 seconds. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually enlarge these keyframes bigger. So the bottom one was 375 to start, so we're just gonna reach up to, we'll call it 400. We'll see how 400 feels, just rough, doesn't need to be exact. But what this is going to do is it is going to essentially have our animation scale up, 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 gets really big, and then it falls back into place. Now with everything highlighted, we're gonna come in here, we're gonna zoom in, we're gonna try to bring all of this stuff back down to 0. There should be a few keyboard clicks that we gotta do here, and just get it back down to 0. And now with all of those same keyframes still highlighted, we are going to click and drag this all the way out to the right, so that way we have a slower kind of increase into the fall back down, so we can see it snaps a little bit more than before. And to play it, we will see that it reaches up and then it snaps back down. So now what we can do that we have that is we can start actually trimming up the beginning portion here, so that way we're not getting all these inverted circles. So quite simply, to trim these up, what we're going to do is we're going to pay attention to the numbers here for the percentages. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our page up and down buttons on our keyboard to move one frame left and right. And what we're basically going to do is we're going to go to the point of each layer where we are closest to 0 on the positive side. So this is negative 5.1%. This is 4.3. So we just want to avoid all the inverted layers. And what we're going to do is we're going to just select the layer that we want. We're going to hit Alt on the keyboard, and then we're going to do left bracket, which will trim our layer to the playhead. If we hit right bracket, that will trim the out to the playhead. For now, we're just going to do the in point because we haven't done the second half of this animation. And so this way we don't also have to come back to our mouse and click down to the next layer. What we're going to do is we're going to hit Control, and then we're going to do down and up arrows, so that way we can move between layer and layer. So now on this layer, we're going to go back to our page up and down, and we are going to move to where we see this number closest to 0 on the positive side, and then we're going to do Alt, bracket again, and then Control, down arrow to get to the next layer, and then page up and down to get to the frame where we are closest to 0. And quite simply, I'm just going to run through this really quickly, and you can do the same. And just like that, we should have everything done. This last layer shouldn't need any trimming, as you remember we set it to 0. But now that we have everything trimmed, and if I hit play, we now have none of those inverted keyframes anymore. Or not keyframes, but inverted layers. And we now just kind of start once it's closest to 0, and it starts its animation there. And it looks like everything's just growing from nothing, essentially. But now that we have all of that, why sit here and redo all that work? We know we need the animation to leave pretty much the same way that it came on, because this loops as well. We're going to highlight all of our keyframes. We're going to hit Control-C to copy, and then we're going to move to about the 4-second marker here, and we're going to hit Control-V to paste, and then we are going to right-click while everything is still selected, come down to Keyframe Assistant, and then directly over we have Time Reverse Keyframes, and this will simply just reverse the keyframes that we have copied and pasted. And yeah, this kind of already gives us the exact out that we have going in. And again, because we need to move around some of these keyframes and some of the graph editors, we're going to leave trimming those to the next step. But really quickly, let's grab this middle set of these keyframes here, and we're going to slide this over to just split the difference of this section. I'm going to call this the out section and this the in section over here. So we're just going to use these keyframes to kind of just eyeball it, split the difference visually, and that should be good enough. And then what I want us to do is I want right here, I want it to slowly start because we're starting from kind of nothing, and then I want the graph to kind of pick up the most in between these two keyframes and then start slowly pulling itself out and then whooshes out over here. So to do so, we are going to highlight this, we're going to come into here. I'm going to zoom on in, and for this graph, like I mentioned, we're going to pull it over. We want it to start slow and basically be the fastest in the middle. And then what I want to do is come back over here. I want these keyframes here. So my bad. Highlight this set of keyframes right here. Click on in. And then we're going to pull that over so that way, again, it starts slow and then it's fastest down here and it's snappy. So if I hit play from the start on this now, this is what it's kind of looking like. And it gives it that little pop. And that little pop right there is what's going to really motivate the coin flip. So what we can also do here is, if we wanted to, say we really want this to reach up. I kind of like where it's at, but you know, if we wanted it to reach even further up, we could grab all of these middle keyframes and make it even larger than, say, this one, just to vary some of our keyframes so they're not as, you know, rigid. It feels like it's a different animation the whole way through, aka when it reaches the biggest over here, it's not the same biggest that it reaches over here. In my opinion, it just makes an animation not feel repetitive, and it allows the whole animation to be fluid. Just some of those slight variation changes. It's not the biggest deal breaker to making your animation look good, but it's just like one of those little things that I do for myself, so I'll make that a tiny bit bigger. And now that we kind of have all of our end keyframes visually where we want the animation to be, we can do exactly what we did over here on the start, but we can do it on the back end. So what we can do is we can deselect, select that first layer, page up and down to get our percentage closest to 0 on the positive side, and then we hit Alt and now right bracket, so the out bracket, and then Control down arrow to get to the next layer, and then page down to move over to where we need it, and then Alt bracket, and we just repeat this process so that way we can have all of our layers trim out and disappear visually on the timeline. And again, the last one, you shouldn't have to do anything because this is the one that we originally pulled all the way to 0. And if we give this a full playthrough, this should all cut out at the perfect time now. And perfect. So now the next step of kind of manipulating some of these keyframes here, specifically if we look in the middle here, nothing is going on. We are completely frozen. So what I want to do to kind of make this feel like when it pops up and it lands, it kind of gives like a fabric-y vibe or like a slinky vibe to the other layers. So what we're going to do is we're just going to offset all of these keyframes a little bit here. So in order to stagger them, we are going to select all of these keyframes here, and then we're going to hit Alt, right arrow 2 times to drag it to the right, and then we are going to shift click the second circle, and then we are going to Alt 2 times over and repeat this process where we stagger all of these keyframes by 2, and then we are going to drag this set of keyframes, again not grabbing the first circle, those keyframes will stay there, and we are going to now Alt and now left arrow and bring them back this way, and then shift click to deselect and continue this, and this will give us a little, just a little offset in our keyframes, so that way when these land, you can now see that they kind of delay behind. This first one kind of slams down in between here, and then all of these rebound in between. And then same thing when this gets thrown up, the last one, the biggest circle, starts first and starts pushing up all the other layers to finally pop this top one. And yeah, they're just simple, just a little simple kind of staggering of the keyframes adds so much variation to this animation and brings so much life to it. So now that we have all of our scale keyframes kind of figured out, now we can start getting into some of the more advanced parts of this tutorial. And I promise you this doesn't get too confusing. This actually, again, this is a very simple animation for, in my opinion, how it looks. It looks more complicated than it is. And we're actually going to add an expression, but it's not going to be scary. It's going to be a very simple wiggle expression. What we're going to do is we're going to hit Alt on the keyboard, and we're going to just come over to one of our scale stopwatches. And while holding Alt, we're going to left click, and we're going to pull up this. Don't panic just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to type wiggle, and then we're going to do parentheses, and then we are going to do 1, 5, and then we are going to click away. And if we hit play, we can now see on our scale that just this center one is essentially now loosely wiggling around. And all a wiggle expression is just a noise modifier. If you're familiar with any other programs, a lot of other programs like Blender or even DaVinci Resolve, they classify these as noise modifiers rather than After Effects, where they call it a wiggle. And After Effects calling it a wiggle is totally fine. It does exactly what it's saying. It wiggles our numbers and our values around. And quite simply, it just gives some randomness variation to it. So quite simply, this is the frequency, which the value represents how many times per second it will change. So in this instance, 1 time per second. And then this number over here is the amplitude, which I believe is how much it changes by pixels. It's so like this is technically either by pixels or in this instance by percent. So I believe that once every second our value will change randomly within 5. It's not always going to be 5, but it will be within 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to click back in here though, and we are going to hit Control-C to copy it. And then quite simply, we're just going to come into every single one of these scale keyframes, and we're going to Alt click on the stopwatch and then just paste it in here. One thing to note, don't hit enter. If you hit enter, I mean, this is, you can think about this is literally just coding. Inside of here, you can use Java expressions to essentially write out and talk to all these layers. So don't hit enter, because that enters you down to the next line. Just click away and it will apply it to the layer. And yeah, just simply come in here and click on all of these and click away and just paste them in here. And now that they are all in here, we can now see that all of these are moving with their wiggle expressions. It is just going to render this first time, because an expression will add a little bit of heaviness to this. And one of the things I did notice here at the end, now that we have the wiggle on here, is we can see our last layer because we never trimmed it out. So we will just go over to here, right about here, and we are going to highlight that and remove that. So now that when we go to that next frame, it is completely off of our timeline. But to play it again with everything rendered out and playing real time, we now have the wiggle added into there, and it's just adding all that extra life, which I really like. What we can do is, for now, we are going to select all of these, hit U on the keyboard to collapse them. We have our 5 layers right here, and here is where we can now add in our logo. So if we go back over to our project tab, go into your files and go ahead and click and drag your logo into your project window over here. I gotta go find mine really quickly. Okay, so I found my logo. I am going to click and drag this one on over into here. And once you have your logo imported into your project, go ahead and drag it onto your timeline, into your composition. I'm going to drop mine right on top here. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit S on the keyboard. I'm positioned with my playhead kind of somewhere over here in the middle of my animation. Preferably, I guess, in between those offsetted keyframes, so it's the most still that it's going to be. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of place this to the size that we want it to be on our shape. And then what we're quite simply going to do is not on the scale keyframe, on the overall layer. We are going to grab the pick whip and we are going to drop it onto circle 1. And yeah, so now we can see it takes on the properties of circle 1, which is exactly what we're looking for. And if we do scroll over here, we can see that it inverts. If we remember, we trimmed this layer out. There is other keyframes happening here, so obviously our logo is going to take that as well. So what we can do while selected on circle 1, we can hit I on our keyboard, which is, you can just think of it in and out. I and O will bring you to the start and end of whichever layer you are highlighted on. And basically what we can do is we can get to the end point of this layer, so that way we don't have to, zoom all the way in here and make sure we're actually at the start of our layer. We can just hit I on the keyboard. And now what I'm going to do without grabbing my mouse again is I'm going to do control up arrow to get to this layer, and then Alt left bracket to trim it. And then I'm going to control down here and then hit out. And basically just trim our logo so that way it cuts out and starts when it needs to. Now that we have this looking like this, we're going to get into, again, another slightly advanced part of this tutorial, but I promise you it is not that bad. What we're going to do is we're going to have our logo and we're going to grab our circle 1, so we're going to select both of those. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over to this little cube, which is our 3D layers, and we are going to turn these 2 layers into 3D layers. Don't panic. It is just so that way we can rotate this. We're not doing anything complicated 3D wise. This is just to get a little bit extra motion into that reveal. And like I mentioned, this little pop here, so I am going to select all of these again, hit U on the keyboard, because I want to be able to look at these keyframes and see what the keyframes are doing in here, so that way I can kind of properly lay in my rotation keyframes. And again, because HS, my logo, is pick whipped to the circle, all we really need to do is animate on the circle once, and this logo is going to basically take on all of those properties. So what I'm going to do is on circle 1, hit R on my keyboard to pull up rotation. And basically what we're going to want to do is focus on this Y rotation here, which is what's going to allow us to animate that coin flip. And I'm going to Control Z just to get that off for now. But basically what we are going to do is we're going to go to this keyframe right here on our timeline. And what we're going to do is we're going to lay down our first Y rotation keyframe. While it's selected, we're going to hit F9 on the keyboard to easy ease it. So then I'm going to come over to the start of our circle layer here. So it is right when it comes on screen. And what we're going to do is we're just going to slide this to negative 180. You're more than welcome to do positive 180 if you want it to rotate on the other side. I'm just going to come in here and type it in. And what we're going to have is as this gets thrown up into the air, it is going to rotate, and then HS written the proper way is going to land. And what we can kind of do here to make it so that way we never see this ugly side of the animation, we're going to go frame by frame here, and we're going to notice that there's a frame here where there is absolutely nothing, and that is because this is a 2D layer. We don't have any thickness to this shape, which is totally fine. This is what helps keep it kind of simple and not over the top. But what we're going to do is we're just going to pull a little tomfoolery, and we're going to highlight our logo layer, and we are going to Alt and trim it in there, so it's going to start its layer a little bit later, and basically what that's going to do is it's going to make it look like we're on the back side of this layer, and then once we switch around, we actually get that logo reveal. And if I play that in full time, we get to see how that works. Nice little reveal. So to continue this animation, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come out to right about here in line with this keyframe. We are going to click on this, we're going to Control C, and we are going to Control V so we duplicate it, so that way we don't rotate anymore. And now we are getting into the basically making our logo disappear again already. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just kind of split the difference here in between these two keyframes. And what we're gonna do is we're going to rotate it in the positive number now, just slightly. I'm gonna go plus 20. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of preemptively motivate the motion for our coin flip to go in one direction, and then completely start flipping in the opposite direction. And we are going to come over here, and we are then going to drag this number all the way back down to the negative, and we're going to go negative 180, I believe, and that is going to give us this pop. And then it's going to continue through its rotation, and then it's going to fall out into the abyss. And again, we're having that same problem where we see the logo inverted over here. So quite simply, what we are going to do is we're going to find that frame where it is basically completely perpendicular to us, so we don't see it. And we're going to hit Alt, right bracket to end that layer once it makes its flip over and away from camera. And to play that, we now see that it comes on screen like so, and then it exits in a very similar fashion off of our screen. And now, one more thing that we can do to really make this simple animation that much better would be simply coming back to our circle 1, going over to our effects control, and what I want to do is I want to animate some of our drop shadow. So if you are familiar with shadows and lighting and whatnot, this object, as it comes towards camera, it's getting further away from the layers that it's sitting on, which basically means that the shadow should get softer, and should technically spread a little bit further. So what we're going to do is we're going to animate that, and then once it lands back on top of our shapes, it should have about the hardness of the shadow that we originally put in here. So to simply do so, what I am going to do is I am going to come to about here where we first see our layer. I am going to click on both of these, and I am going to lay a keyframe down for distance and softness on both of these, and then I'm going to come back down here on the layer, hit U, so that way I can see them. We are going to also come back here, and I'm going to lay down a keyframe on opacity because that's how we're going to fade it away. But now that we have that, we're going to come back here, hit U so we can pull up all those keyframes, reselect all of these, and hit F9. We should have 3 keyframes per. There's a possibility we might not touch some of the things we keyframed, but sometimes I will just throw in the keyframes to start here and experiment. I can't exactly remember what keyframes we need, so we're going to find it out together. But quite simply, we are going to come back over to here. We're going to make the softness 1000. And then this softness, I'm going to make 500. And then on both of these, we are going to bring the opacity down to 30%. 30%. And then we are going to copy these keyframes that are to the left, and then for when it lands, we are then going to paste these again. And now we can kind of see as our coin goes up into the air, we lose some of that shadow. And then as we fall back down, we get that shadow back. And what we can even do, and it looks like I didn't use the distance keyframes at all, which is totally fine. But if we hit K or J on the keyboard, again, on just another keyboard shortcut, this will bring us to our next keyframe or set of keyframes left or right of your playhead. So I am going to select all of these keyframes for the drop shadow. I'm going to go over to the graph editor. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to pull these like so. And the reason for doing so is the original keyframes for the motion of this layer snapping back down is pulled like this, so the shadows should do the same thing. So that way they kind of become more present towards the later half of this animation when it actually is getting closer back to the surface it is sitting on. Now, with all of that selected like so, we are going to zoom out of our timeline here, and we are going to copy, and we're going to come over here to this keyframe, and we are going to paste, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes, and then we are going to basically have the same thing happen here, but we need to stagger these keyframes separately from where they were before. And we're just going to pull these ones to the middle and these ones to the end of this set of keyframes. So that way now it gets faded as it's up here. And then that shadow starts becoming a little bit more present as it goes back into disappearing. So now if I come over here and click away and hit play, that's what our shadow is doing, and it disappears and then grows, and it just gives a little bit more shape to it. If you really wanted to get super technical, you could do this same exact concept to all the other layers, but just have to morph it so that way they kind of fit what is actually happening in the animation. And then quite simply, to polish this animation off, and in the wise words of Andrew Kramer, which if you guys have not watched, I totally recommend watching his After Effects tutorials. He is actually where I started learning about After Effects back in, I want to say 2018. But in the wise words of Andrew Kramer, for the advanced tutorial, we are going to select all of our layers, and we're going to come over to these circles, and we are going to add motion blur. Just a note, at this point, if you hit play on your playhead or on your timeline, things are probably going to move significantly slower. As you can see, motion blur is going to add a bit of extra heavy lifting to your graphic, but we can see that we now have some realistic motion blur added into our shapes, and this just adds a little bit more realism to your animation and always makes things look that much more seamless. And with that said, the last step of this is to simply export it, so that way we can have it be transparent. And to simply do that, we are going to hit Control M to pull up our export settings. We're going to hit the lossless highlight here. We're going to change our format from AVI, which AVI would work for getting it, but it is a large file, or it will end up being a large file. So what I do is I come down here to QuickTime. We go on video output channels. We change it from RGB to RGB plus alpha, and all that means is alpha is just going to make anything that is not what we have added in here. So anything that is a black screen is just going to be exported as transparent, and then you can hit OK, and then you can go to your output settings and save this to wherever you need it to be saved to, and then you can queue it up and render it here, or you can queue it up in Media Encoder and export it over there, but quite simply for me, I always render with inside of here. But yeah, that is how you guys make this very simple logo animation. Again, like I said, there's literally 6 layers, 1 pre-comp, super easy. We got to dabble with a little bit of 3D-ness, a little bit of, you know, keyframing some drop shadows to make things look 3D while keeping it 2D and keeping things simple. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you guys have any ideas, questions, concerns, whatever it is, make sure to comment it below. I'll be more than happy to make like short content, kind of filling in any, you know, maybe areas where I didn't do such a good job explaining how to do something. So if you ever run into a problem, make sure to comment it, point it out, and I'll definitely be sure to make another video to try to fix some of that up for you guys. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully I'll see you on the next animation tutorial.